With me now is Todd Prager and Mark Kramer, co-plaintiffs in the case to allow public access to Oswego Lake. I want to thank you both for being here today. Thanks for your time.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Before we address the concerns of the Oswego Lake residents, I want to talk about why you guys have spent years battling to get public access to this lake. Who wants to begin with that?
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah.
So the Oregon Statehood Act really guarantees the public the right to use our navigable waterways in the state. And you know, it's a dangerous precedent when we allow wealthy and powerful people to take over a public resource. So this is really about what it means to be an Oregonian and our connection to natural resources, and not setting that precedent that people can take over our public treasures.
Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I love Oregon. I'm a kayaker. I've kayaked rivers and lakes and streams in Oregon. And back in 2012, I read a Willamette Week article, and they said, you know, you can go onto this lake. And so I brought my kayak down, had a wonderful time, and then 3 weeks later, the city criminalized access. And that's when we started the litigation. But, you know, at all times, all we were seeking was, you know, safe access to the lake, respectful of the lake and respectful of the people and the resource.
The public gained access in March. A report from the city of Lake Oswego indicates nearly 3,200 people entered Oswego Lake at Lower Millennium Plaza Park between the end of May to mid-October. More than 2,100 people were on paddle boards compared to 747 on kayaks, 253 were fishing, 63 were swimmers. What kind of growth are you expecting when it comes to 2026? Now, seeing how many people have used it so far, what do you think?
I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, the first summer of access, you would expect that people were probably curious. I would expect there'd probably be a bump this first year. And the report said the number of repeat visitors kind of went down over time, and it's mostly people local to the area just kind of using the water. So I'm not seeing what I expect to be a huge spike in the future.
What do you see when you hear those numbers from the city of Lake Oswego? What stands out to you?
I thought there'd be more canoers and kayakers, but paddleboards are the rage now, you know, particularly with, you know, millennials and Gen X and Gen Z, and that's great. However you get to enjoy the water, whether you're swimming or kayaking or canoeing or fishing off a kayak, I think that's just great.
You mentioned the paddleboarders. Oswego Lake residents had some concerns about the paddleboarders. Let's listen to this. Let's play that right now.
We have specific lake rules here that keeps all non-motorized traffic within 100 to 150 feet from shore, but there's also a state rule regarding paddle boards is that they're supposed to navigate close to the shoreline, and that's mostly because they're very difficult to see. They disappear into the background. If the sun is low in the sky, you don't see them. You know, there's really no enforcement.
How do you respond to their concerns about the paddle boarders? What do you think?
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah.
So there's actually no state rule about paddleboarders staying close to the shoreline. I spoke with the Oregon Marine Board, and that's not a rule. And similar to the Willamette River, where I swim also, paddleboarders aren't restricted to certain areas. I think it's a good idea for people to stay to the side, and as a swimmer, I stay to the side of the waterway. Just it makes a lot of sense, but just to clear up that misperception that there's not an actual rule requiring that.
What about his concern there's no enforcement of that?
Well, it's not a rule, so you don't need to enforce a rule that doesn't exist.
Let me ask you, Todd, you've said that you support the idea that people using the lake should adhere to some safety protocols, like wearing life jackets and carrying a whistle. We do hear from residents that people using the lake are not following proper safety measures. And when you hear that, do you understand how people might feel inclined to restrict access to the lake then?
You know, I think that's an excuse. It's the Oregon Marine Board has reviewed, and I've talked to them about the first summer of access. They're not recommending any rule changes, and the situation in Oswego Lake's not any different than any other waterway in Oregon, and there's going to be a certain percentage of people not following the rules, and that's where education and enforcement comes into play. And you know, we don't need to treat this lake any different than any other waterway in Oregon.
How do you get that education out there? What do you do to let people know?
Well, there's a park ranger during the hot days, during the popular days. There are signs there to the benefit, to the credit of the city of Lake Oswego. They've put in a life jacket station. So I think those are all great things. And then there's, the power of example. You see a kayaker, you see a paddleboarder, you're going to emulate, what you see. And I want to make the point that there have been kayakers and paddleboarders and kayakers on the lake long before, we got access. So we don't even know about the folks that are not doing what they should do right now. Are they from the city of Lake Oswego? Are they on the lake? Are they others? So we just don't know. But in any case, there have been no drownings, there have been no accidents. There really haven't been any significant problems since the lake was opened up, and we don't expect any going forward.
Overall, you think it's going pretty well at this point, both of you? Since the access began in March, you think it's going as well as you could have expected?
I think it's going great. And, throughout this time since 2012, it's as if the earth would fall apart, and the city couldn't survive, and property values would go down, and there would be drownings and accidents, and none of that has proven true. It's just a great public resource, and we're promoting and exercising, safe and proper access.
We hear from, of course, the residents out there say they pay thousands of dollars per household every year to maintain that lake and keep it healthy as well. What do you say to them? They're frustrated, obviously. You got these folks coming on who aren't paying anything. They've been paying for years now. How do you respond to them?
I think it was a risky business model for a private corporation to claim that they own this public lake. So that was a gamble that they took, and they lost on that gamble. So they've spent money, and that was their choice. They are a homeowners association, so any money they spend, it does benefit the people that live on the lake. There's other examples on Blue Lake. There's their Interlochen Homeowners Association that pays dues for their interests, but then there's also public access. So, the fact that they've paid dues, that's their choice. That's something that they decided to do, and it doesn't mean that it becomes their lake at that point.
Do you think it can handle the increase in usage? Fairly small lake, right? Oswego Lake. What do you think?
There haven't been any problems. If you look at the report that the city published, been very few problems. No drownings, no accidents, no bottlenecks, no traffic, no parking problems. So I think it's working just fine. And, in terms of folks on the lake, paying for upkeep and maintenance, that's great. They get to use the lake 24/7, 365 days a year. I've been on the lake 3 times since then. I'll probably go a couple of more times this year. And just like any other Oregonians that use a public resource, it's maintained. If I use a city park in Portland, we just passed a bond to do that. So it's appropriate that people in that jurisdiction, support that resource, but it's also appropriate that the public gets to use it reasonably and safely.
One of the reasons they say it's stayed that way is because of the safety patrol that they pay for out there. What do you say to them?
Well, their safety patrol, a lot of that is to keep people from the public off the lake. So that's been what a lot of their resources have been going to, including lawyers and litigation to keep the public off the lake, and they've appealed this decision to continue fighting to keep the public off the lake. So all of these resources that have been spent, I haven't seen their financials, so I don't know exactly what they're spent on, but I know one of their core missions is to exclude the public from this public lake.
Of course, the residents we talked to, they want it to remain private, as you can well imagine. This is one person we talked to. Let's play that.
We don't think it has the same characteristics as some of the other lakes, which goes into a lot about how the Lake Corporation and the water quality, the safety, all the things that come into play are all framed around that. And so I think our biggest concern is the lake was made public at this point in time, but with no thought going into how that was actually going to be carried out on a day-to-day basis in terms of the safety and the water quality and all the other pieces that go into keeping this lake looking healthy and beautiful and available to people to use.
What do you say to her statement?
She talks about a private lake, but the courts have determined, the Supreme Court has determined, the judge and the jury have determined that in 1859, when we became a state, this was a public resource, and it always has been, and it always will be a public resource. So it is appropriate that the public resource be accessed by the people. In terms of the cost, the city spent $29,000 or so for life jackets, extra park rangers, which is just great. But meanwhile, between the city and the Lake Corporation, they spent over $2 million since 2012 fighting us. That money could have been better used to enhance the lake, keep the lake safe, keep the lake free of algae blooms. It's just a question of dedication of resources.
Still going through the appeals process at this point. Is there anything, do you think, that could make everybody happy here? Do you see a solution that can make everybody happy, Todd?
You know, I'm all for education and the issues that people see out there. I think, you know, there's a lot of bright people that live inside and outside of Lake Oswego, and we can tackle any challenges. If it's life jackets, that was an identified issue early on. The city offered a life jacket station, and then there's been 99% compliance with life jackets since they implemented that station. People staying to the side of the lake, I think some signage is a great idea, and recommending that people stay out of the main channel of the lake, I would support that. If there's increased patrols, that can happen through the city of Lake Oswego. If they wanted to police that area, the Marine Board said that they could deputize local law enforcement to enforce rules out there. So I think there are definite strategies that can be implemented to make it safe, make it equitable, and address any issues that are brought up.
We spent quite a bit of time talking to Lake Corps folks out there. I want to make sure we give you guys a fair shot at this. Is there anything you guys want to say here before we let you go?
Well, let's remember, it's a big lake. What the courts have said, what the judge has said, what the jury has said is you can enter through one point, through a public park, which is Millennium Plaza. So I do respect people having property on the lake and wanting to maintain their property and property values. But accessing the lake from Millennium Plaza really is a very small, if insignificant, burden on those folks. It's a big lake, and their concerns, you know, are valid, but there's nothing that a few hundred canoers, kayakers, and swimmers are going to do to burden those folks. And remember, the court decision says the lake is open to the public for non-motorized vehicles. So we're not talking about yachts, we're not talking about motorboats, we're talking about a canoe, a kayak, a swimmer, a paddleboarder.
Todd Prager, Mark Kramer, I want to thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be following this case as it moves forward.